The ceremonial blade stopped 3 inches from my throat, and every Velkari noble in the grand hall held their breath. This human dares to stand in the presence of the eternal throne without kneeling? Lord Ketharon's voice echoed off the crystalline pillars, dripping with contempt. His pale violet skin flushed darker with rage as he pressed the blade closer. On Velkar Prime, such insolence is answered with blood. I kept my spine straight, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. 3 years as a diplomatic attaché to the Velkari Empire had taught me one thing: show weakness, and you're already dead. Ambassador Chen was informed that humans are exempt from the prostration ritual, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm merely his assistant, but I assumed the same courtesy you assume. Ketharon laughed, a harsh sound that rippled through the assembled court. A creature from a species barely capable of interstellar travel presumes to interpret Velkari law. Murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. I'd seen this before. The casual cruelty the Velkari reserved for species they considered lesser. We'd only made first contact 8 years ago. To them, humanity was an infant stumbling into an ancient ballroom, tracking mud on priceless carpets. Ambassador Chen had collapsed from neural shock 3 hours ago, victim of an accidental contamination in his quarters. I'd been thrust into his place with no preparation, no formal credentials, and apparently no protection. Lord Ketharon, perhaps we might resolve this through diplomatic channels. Diplomatic channels. He spat the words like poison. Your ambassador lies dying because he couldn't handle a simple atmospheric variance. Your species is weak, fragile, and you stand here, refusing to kneel, as if you have any value at all. The blade touched my skin. A thin line of warmth told me it had drawn blood. I thought of my mother, who died on the colony ship that never reached Proxima. I thought of my father, who'd worked himself to death in the lithium mines of Europa, so I could get an education. I thought of every human who'd struggled and sacrificed so that someone like me could stand in a place like this. I would not kneel. If my blood is the price of human dignity, I said quietly, then take it. Ketharon's eyes widened with genuine surprise, then narrowed with cruel anticipation. He drew his arm back for a killing strike. Enough. The word crashed through the hall like a physical force. The crystalline pillars actually resonated with it, filling the air with harmonic overtones that made my teeth ache. Every Velkari in the room dropped to their knees instantly, including Lord Ketharon, whose blade clattered to the marble floor. I turned toward the source of that impossible voice and felt my breath catch. She descended from the elevated throne platform, and with each step, the light in the hall seemed to bend toward her. Queen Seraphael of the Velkari Empire was tall, nearly 7 feet, with skin like polished silver and eyes that shifted between deep violet and burning gold. Her ceremonial robes flowed around her like living shadow, and a crown of crystallized starlight rested upon her brow. But it wasn't her beauty that struck me. It was the profound, aching loneliness I saw in those otherworldly eyes. I recognized it because I saw it every morning in my own mirror. Lord Ketharon, she said, her voice now soft but carrying to every corner of the hall. You would spill blood in my court without my permission. Majesty, the human refused to. I saw what the human did. She had reached the floor now, and was walking toward us. The nobles parted before her like waves before a ship's prow. He stood his ground when any sensible creature would have submitted. He chose death over dishonor. She stopped directly in front of me. This close, I could see the faint luminescence beneath her silver skin, the way her eyes seemed to contain actual stars. She was ancient. The Velkari could live for millennia, and yet something in her expression seemed almost young. Young. Vulnerable. What is your name, human? Marcus Cole, your majesty? Marcus Cole, she repeated, and my name in her voice sounded like music. Do you know what you've done? Offended your court, apparently? A ghost of something. Amusement? Approval flickered across her features. You've done something no one has done in 300 years. You've shown me courage. And then, before the entire assembled court of the Velkari Empire, nobles, warriors, priests, and diplomats from a dozen worlds, the alien queen pulled me into her arms in front of the entire court. No one dared to speak. Her embrace was like being wrapped in starlight and shadow simultaneously. She was cool to the touch, but not cold, and she smelled of something alien yet intoxicating, like ozone and night-blooming flowers. "This human is under my personal protection," she announced, her voice ringing with authority. "Any who harm him answer to me directly." When she released me, I saw something I hadn't expected in the faces of the kneeling nobles. Fear. Not of me, ever of me, but of what the Queen's unprecedented action might mean. Ketharan's face had gone pale lavender with shock and barely concealed fury. The Queen's hand remained on my arm, cool and steady. "Come, Marcus Cole. We have much to discuss." As she led me from the hall, I felt the weight of 100 hostile stares on my back. I had come here as a nobody, a replacement for a dying ambassador from a minor species. I was leaving as something else entirely. I just didn't know yet whether that was a blessing or a death sentence. The Queen's private chambers existed in a part of the palace I hadn't known was accessible. We passed through walls that shimmered and parted at her touch, climbed stairs that seemed to spiral through dimensions I couldn't perceive, and finally emerged into a room that took my breath away. It was a garden, but not like any garden on Earth. Bioluminescent plants grew in impossible configurations, their light pulsing in slow rhythms like heartbeats. A stream of liquid silver wound through the space, and above us, the ceiling was simply gone, opening onto a vista of stars so clear and bright that I felt I could reach up and touch them. "You can breathe normally here," Queen Seraphiel said, releasing my arm. "The atmosphere has been adjusted for human physiology. You were expecting a human guest? I was hoping for one." She moved to a crystalline bench near the silver stream and sat, her robes pooling around her like dark water. She gestured for me to sit across from her. "Please, I imagine you have questions." I had about 1,000, but I started with the most pressing one. "Ambassador Chen, is he going to survive?" Something flickered in her expression. "Approval, perhaps. He will live. I've assigned my personal physicians to his care. The atmospheric variances was no accident, but those responsible will be dealt with. Lord Ketharan, among others." She studied me with those shifting eyes. "You don't seem surprised. I've been on Velkar Prime for 3 months. I've seen how some of your people look at us. We're inconvenient, I suppose. A reminder that the universe is larger than the Empire. You understand more than most of your kind. More than most of mine, if I'm honest." She paused, and for a moment, the regal mask slipped, revealing something raw beneath. "Do you know why I brought you here, Marcus Cole?" "I have theories. None of them make much sense." "Tell me anyway." I considered my words carefully. "You're isolated. A queen is by nature alone, but there's something more. The way your court looks at you, it's not just reverence. It's distance. Calculation. They're afraid of you, but they don't love you." Her sharp intake of breath told me I'd struck something true. "Continue," she said quietly. "You've been on that throne for a long time. Long enough to see generations of nobles come and go, all of them wanting something from you. None of them seeing you." I met her eyes, those impossible stellar eyes. When I refused to kneel, I wasn't showing courage. I was just being myself. And maybe that's what caught your attention. Not bravery, but authenticity. For a long moment, she said nothing. The bioluminescent plants pulsed around us, and somewhere in the garden, something sang a haunting melody. 742 years, she finally said. That's how long I've sat on the eternal throne. My mother ruled for 3,000 years before me, and her mother for 2,000 before her. We are long-lived, as you know. But longevity is not a blessing, Marcus Cole. It's a weight. I can't imagine. No. You can't. There was no cruelty in her words, just simple truth. Your species burns so briefly and so brightly. You love fiercely, grieve deeply, and then you're gone. To us, you're like shooting stars. Beautiful, but impossible to hold. Is that why your people look down on us? Because we're temporary? Partly. But also because you terrify them. She leaned forward, and in the starlight, her silver skin seemed to glow. Do you know what the Velkari fear most? Not death. We accept death eventually comes for all things. What we fear is irrelevance. We've ruled this sector for 50,000 years. We've watched species rise and fall like tides. We believed we understood the universe. And then, humanity showed up. And then humanity showed up, she agreed. A species that went from riding animals to splitting atoms in the span of a few heartbeats, cosmically speaking. A species that shouldn't have survived its own violence but somehow did. A species that looks at the impossible and says, well, let's try it anyway. She rose and moved to the silver stream, trailing her fingers through the liquid metal. My advisors want me to marginalize your kind, to ensure humanity never becomes a threat to Velkari supremacy. They arrange accidents for your ambassadors. They deny your requests for technology exchanges. They mock your customs and belittle your achievements. And you disagree? I see what they cannot. She turned back to me, and her eyes had settled on gold. Warm. Intense. Humanity isn't a threat to the Empire. Humanity is a mirror, one that shows us what we've forgotten how to be. Passionate, hopeful, willing to risk everything for what we believe in. I stood, though my legs felt unsteady. Your Majesty, Seraphael, she said softly. When we're alone, please. Just Seraphael. Seraphael. The name felt forbidden on my tongue, sacred somehow. Why are you telling me this? I'm nobody. I'm not even officially a diplomat. I'm an assistant who got promoted by disaster. You're exactly what you said, authentic. Do you know how rare that is? How many beings speak to me with calculation in every word, fear in every gesture, greed in every glance? She moved closer, and I could feel the cool radiation of her presence. You looked into my eyes and saw my loneliness. No one has done that in 3 centuries. Not since. She stopped, and I saw something I never expected to see on that regal face. Grief. Since who? I asked gently. My bondmate. My husband, in your terms. He died in the Periphery Wars 400 years ago. Her voice had gone distant. He was the last person who saw me as Seraphael rather than the Queen. The last person who touched my hand without wanting something in return. Without thinking, I reached out and took her hand. She went very still. Her skin was cool and smooth, like polished marble, but beneath it, I felt a pulse. Quick and startled, like a frightened bird. I want something, I said honestly. I want Ambassador Chen to recover. I want humanity to be treated fairly. I want to understand why you chose me for this, whatever this is. Is that all? I looked at our joined hands, her silver skin against my brown, her long, elegant fingers wrapped around my shorter ones. No. I also want to know what it would take to make you smile. Really smile, I mean. Not the diplomatic mask you wear for your court. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then her lips curved, just slightly, just a little, and her eyes brightened to pure gold. You're either very brave or very foolish, Marcus Cole. Probably both. It's a human specialty. She laughed, A soft, surprised sound like she'd forgotten she could make it. And for just a moment, in that impossible garden beneath alien stars, the queen of the Velkari Empire looked almost happy. "Stay," she said. "Not as a prisoner or a guest, as a friend, perhaps. Teach me what I've forgotten. Show me why humanity burns so brightly. And in exchange, I'll protect your people. Not from above, as a queen protecting lesser subjects, but from beside, as an ally, an equal. I should have consulted with Earth. I should have contacted my superiors, weighed the political implications, considered the dangers. Instead, I squeezed her hand gently and said the only thing that felt true. I'd like that, Seraphael." Her smile widened, and the garden seemed to glow brighter in response. I didn't know it then, but that moment, two lonely souls finding each other across the vast gulf of species and station, would change the fate of two civilizations. All because I refused to kneel. 3 months later, they came for me in the night. I'd grown accustomed to the Queen's palace, to its shifting corridors, its singing crystals, its gardens that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. I'd grown accustomed to Seraphael herself, her quiet laughter in our private moments, her hand reaching for mine when she thought no one was watching, the way her eyes turned pure gold whenever she saw me. We'd been careful, so careful. Our relationship existed in the spaces between official functions, in stolen hours in the quantum garden, in conversations that lasted until the binary suns rose. We hadn't even kissed, not properly, though there had been moments when the space between us had grown so charged I could barely breathe. But we'd underestimated the depth of hatred among those who opposed us. The first warning I had was when my door dissolved into a dozen armed Velkari warriors, their ceremonial blades replaced with pulse rifles. "The human comes with us," Lord Ketharan announced, stepping through the breach. "By order of the High Council, the Queen has been—" His smile was cold and satisfied. "A temporary measure. A toxin that will keep her docile while we correct her recent mistakes." They dragged me through corridors I didn't recognize, deeper into parts of the palace that felt ancient and hostile. The crystalline walls here were dark, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Finally, they threw me into a chamber where a dozen Velkari nobles waited, all high-ranking, all wearing expressions of cold triumph. At their center stood an elderly female with deep purple skin and eyes like frozen stars. "Grand Matriarch Velthera," Ketharan announced. "I present the human contamination." Velthera studied me with clinical distaste. "This is what turned our queen into a fool. I expected something more impressive." "I'm sorry to disappoint," I said, climbing to my feet. "Would you prefer I juggle?" Ketharan's fist connected with my jaw, sending me sprawling. "You will speak with respect in the presence of the Grand Matriarch." The Grand Matriarch drugged her own granddaughter. I spat blood onto the dark floor. "Forgive me if I'm not inclined to show respect." Velthera's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those frozen eyes. "You know who I am to Seraphael." "Interesting. Has she told you much of our family, human? Enough to know you've never forgiven her for taking the throne instead of your son?" This time, a reaction, a tightening around her mouth. "My son would have been a strong ruler. He understood that the Velkari must remain pure, supreme. But Seraphael was chosen by the crystal, and we accept the crystal's judgment, even when it's wrong." "Sounds like you don't accept it at all." "What I accept," Velthera said, moving closer until she loomed over me, "is that sometimes the crystal's errors must be managed. Seraphael is a good queen in many ways. Her rule has been prosperous, stable. But this obsession with humanity, with you specifically. It threatens everything we've built. Because I made her remember how to laugh. Velthera's eyes narrowed. Because you've made her weak. She speaks of alliance with your species. Partnership. D. She's commissioned studies on human art, music, philosophy. She's questioning policies that have governed us for millennia. God forbid your queen should grow. God forbid, Velthera agreed coldly, that our queen should fall in love with a creature who will be dust before she's finished her. Morning meditation. The words hit harder than Ketharon's fist. Because they were true, weren't they? Whatever was growing between Seraphael and me, it was impossible. She would live for thousands more years. I'd be lucky to see another 50. What could I possibly offer her, except eventual heartbreak? I see you understand, Velthera said, reading my expression. You're not entirely stupid for a human. So here is my offer. Leave Velkar Prime tonight. Return to your people. Tell them the diplomatic mission is concluded, and never speak of your time here again. And if I refuse, then you die, and we tell Seraphael you left of your own accord. That you couldn't bear the weight of a queen's attention. She'll be heartbroken, but she'll survive. She's survived worse. I thought about it. I really did. Every logical part of my brain screamed that Velthera was right, that my presence here was just setting Seraphael up for inevitable grief. Better a clean break now than decades of borrowed time, followed by an eternity of loss. But then I remembered her smile in the garden, the way she'd whispered my name like a prayer, the confession she'd made just last week, when she'd admitted she'd started counting time differently, not in centuries, but in moments with me. No, I said. Velthera blinked. No, I won't leave. And no, you won't tell Seraphael I abandoned her, because you know she'd never believe it. I stood, despite my spinning head, despite the blood running down my chin. She knows me. She sees me. And she knows I would never leave her without a fight. Then you choose death. I choose her, whatever that costs. Velthera stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded to Ketharon. Kill him. Make it look like an accident. The human fell from a balcony, perhaps. So tragic. Ketharon's blade rose, and the wall exploded. Light, brilliant, burning, impossible, flooded the chamber. Through the breach strode Seraphael, but not the Seraphael I knew. This was the queen of the Velkari Empire in the full fury of her power. Her skin blazed like a captured sun. Her eyes were twin supernovae, and the air around her crackled with energy that made my hair stand on end. Grandmother, Dadi Naluniao. The word was a thunderclap. Every noble in the chamber fell to their knees, even Velthera, though the Grand Matriarch remained defiant, her chin raised. Seraphael, the toxin should have what? Suppressed my will, kept me docile while you murdered the man I love. I love. She'd said it. Not in the soft intimacy of our garden, but here, in front of her enemies, as a declaration and a challenge. Seraphael crossed the chamber, and where she walked, the dark crystals cracked and burned. She stopped in front of me, and for just a moment, the terrible fire in her eyes softened. Marcus, are you hurt? I've had worse. Well, no, actually I haven't. This is definitely the worst, but I'm handling it. Despite everything, she almost smiled. Then she turned back to her grandmother, and the fury returned. You poisoned me. You kidnapped my chosen. You intended to kill him and lie to me about it. Each accusation landed like a blow. Give me one reason I shouldn't execute you all where you kneel. Because we did it for you, Velthera said, and incredibly, her voice was steady. Because we love you, and we couldn't watch you destroy yourself over a human. Love? Seraphael's laugh was bitter. You call this love? Manipulation? Poison? Murder? We call it duty. The duty of family to protect their queen from her own heart. Velthera rose, slowly, her ancient body trembling but her spirit unbowed. He will die, Seraphia. In a few decades, the blink of an eye, he will grow old and feeble and die, and you will be left with nothing but grief. We tried to spare you that. By taking him from me now, by giving me centuries to regret never knowing what we could have been, by letting you grieve a brief attachment rather than a deep bond, by protecting you from, I don't need your protection. Seraphael's voice broke, and for a moment I saw not the blazing queen but the lonely woman I'd come to know. I need him. I need someone who sees me. Do you understand? 700 years of loneliness, grandmother. 700 years of being a symbol, a throne, a crown. And then this human, this impossible, temporary, beautiful human, he looked at me and saw me. Not the queen. Me. Oh. Tears were streaming down her silver face, and each one fell like liquid starlight. I know he'll die, she continued. I know I'll grieve. I've already grieved. For Kale, for my mother, for everyone I've ever loved. Do you think I'm afraid of grief? Grief is the price of love, grandmother. And after 7 centuries of refusing to pay it, I'm ready. She turned to me and held out her hand. Marcus Cole. I'm offering you everything I have and everything I am. A throne you didn't ask for. A burden you don't deserve. And a love that will outlive you by millennia. Will you take it? I looked at her hand, silver and trembling slightly, reaching for me across the gulf between worlds. I thought about my father, working himself to death so I could reach for the stars. I thought about my mother, dying on a ship that never reached its destination. They had reached for impossible things, too. And sometimes, just sometimes, the impossible reached back. I took her hand. I'm not afraid of being temporary, I said. I'm afraid of wasting the time I have. And there's nothing I'd rather do with whatever years I have left than spend them with you. Seraphael pulled me close, and in front of her grandmother, her court, and her would-be assassins, she kissed me. It was like kissing a star, cool fire and infinite depth, and the strange sensation of touching something vast and ancient and improbably gentle. When we parted, both of us were crying. This isn't over, Velthera said quietly. The council won't accept. The council will accept my chosen or they will accept my wrath, Seraphael replied. And grandmother, you will be confined to your estates until I decide what mercy, if any, you deserve. As the guards led Velthara and her conspirators away, Seraphael turned back to me. The blazing power had faded, leaving just the woman, tired, tear-streaked, but smiling. I'm sorry, she said. I should have told you sooner. I should have. I kissed her again, softer this time. You told me when it mattered, I said. That's enough. In the ruined chamber, surrounded by cracked crystals and the lingering ozone of her fury, we held each other until the binary suns rose. The wedding was broadcast across 1,000 worlds. They called it the Union of Stars, the first formal bonding between a Valkyrie and a human, between the most powerful queen in the sector and a former diplomatic assistant from a backwater planet called Earth. The ceremony took place in the Crystal Cathedral, where ancient traditions demanded that the bond be witnessed by representatives of every species in the Empire's domain. 2,000 dignitaries filled the crystalline pews, and billions more watched through neural broadcast. I stood at the altar in ceremonial robes that the palace tailors had spent weeks crafting, a fusion of human and Valkyrie design that somehow managed to make me look almost worthy of standing next to a queen. Almost. Ambassador Chen, fully recovered now, stood beside me as my witness. He'd tried to talk me out of this 3 times. "You realize this is insane," he'd said the night before. "You're about to become the consort of the most powerful ruler in the sector. Every political faction, every enemy, every jealous noble will target you. I know, and you're going to die. Relatively soon, from her perspective. She'll have centuries alone after you're gone. I know that too. And you're still doing this?" I'd looked at him then, this man who'd been more father to me than any figure in my life since my own father died. "Ambassador, when you've found something worth dying for, living for it is easy." Now, as the ceremonial music began, and the vast doors at the end of the cathedral opened, I understood what I'd meant. Seraphael entered, and the entire assembly rose. She wore a gown of woven starlight. Literally, the Valkyrie could do things with light that defied physics, and her crown had been remade to include elements from Earth. Tiny blue gems arranged in the pattern of our home planet's continents. Her silver skin glowed, her eyes were pure gold, and she was looking at me like I was the only person in the cathedral. The only person in the universe. She reached the altar, and High Priestess Velmora began the ceremony. The words were ancient, spoken in a form of Valkyrie I barely understood, but Seraphael had taught me the responses. "Who witnesses this bond?" Velmora intoned. "The stars witness," the assembly responded. "Who sanctions this bond?" "The crystal sanctions." "And who carries this bond into eternity?" This was where tradition changed. Usually, the response was simply the names of the betrothed, but Seraphael had insisted on something different. "We carry it," we said together. "Two made one, temporary and eternal, separate but joined." I felt something shift in the air, a resonance, a harmony. The crystal at the heart of the cathedral began to pulse with light, and I felt it reaching into me, touching something deep. "The crystal accepts," Velmora announced, and there was genuine surprise in her voice. The crystal had been known to reject bonds it found unworthy. No one had been entirely sure it would accept a human. "Then, by the light of the first star and the blessing of the crystal eternal," Velmora continued, her voice rising, "I declare this bond complete. What the universe has joined, let no being sever." Seraphael took my hands, and the cathedral erupted in light. It wasn't painful, it was transcendent. For one infinite moment, I felt everything she was. Centuries of memory, oceans of loneliness, mountains of grief, and beneath it all, a love so profound and desperate that it made me want to weep. And she felt me, my brief, burning life, my losses and hopes, my fear of not being enough, and my determination to be enough anyway. When the light faded, we were still holding hands, but something had changed. I could feel her at the edge of my consciousness, a warm presence, like sunlight through a window. "The bond is strong," Velmora said, and now her surprise had become something like awe. "I have not seen its like in many centuries." Seraphael smiled at me, and her smile held everything, joy and grief and love and acceptance. "He is remarkable," she said simply. "The crystal could see what some could not." In the front row, I saw Velthera watching. The Grand Matriarch had been released from confinement for the ceremony, a gesture of reconciliation that Seraphael had insisted upon. Her expression was unreadable, but as our eyes met, she gave me the slightest nod. Not acceptance, perhaps. Not yet. But acknowledgement. Outside the cathedral, the cheering of the crowds was audible even through the crystalline walls. Representatives from dozens of species had made the journey for this moment, including a substantial delegation from Earth. As Seraphael and I walked down the aisle, hands still joined, I saw human faces in the crowd, diplomats, scientists, even a few ordinary citizens who had won the lottery for witness tickets. They were crying, cheering. reaching out as if to touch the hem of Seraphael's gown. For them, this wasn't just a wedding. It was proof. Proof that humanity belonged among the stars. Proof that we were worthy of love, of respect, of partnership. Proof that a nobody from a nobody planet could capture the heart of a queen. At the cathedral doors, we paused. Beyond them lay the grand plaza where millions of Valkyrie citizens waited, along with broadcasts that would carry this moment to every corner of the empire. "Are you ready?" Seraphael asked quietly. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "But I've been terrified since the moment I met you. It hasn't stopped me yet." She laughed, that soft, surprised sound I loved so much. "Then let's give them something to remember." We stepped out into the light, and the crowd's roar hit us like a physical force. Valkyrie, humans, and a dozen other species all united in celebration of something new. Something unprecedented. Seraphael raised our joined hands, and the roar grew louder. "Citizens of the Empire," she announced, her voice carrying across the plaza through some trick of crystal acoustics. "I present to you my bondmate, my consort, my chosen, Marcus Cole of Earth." Another wave of sound, cheering, singing, the harmonic chiming of Valkyrie celebration crystals. And then she did something that shocked them all into silence. She pulled me into her arms. Not a formal embrace, not a ceremonial gesture. She simply wrapped her arms around me and held me close, her cheek pressed against mine, her breath warm in my ear. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for refusing to kneel. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for staying." I held her back, this impossible queen, this ancient being who had chosen me out of all the souls in all the galaxy. "Thank you for catching me," I replied. "Thank you for letting me love you." When we finally parted, the crowd remained silent. A Valkyrie queen displaying such open affection was almost unheard of. It was vulnerable, undignified, completely against protocol. It was perfect. Slowly, the silence broke, not into cheering this time, but into something gentler. Applause. Genuine, warm, accepting applause. Even the most traditional Valkyrie nobles seemed moved. Because that's the thing about love, I realized. Real love. It's terrifying and irrational and absolutely worth every moment of fear. It doesn't care about species or station or lifespan. It simply is. And sometimes, it even changes the universe. In the years that followed, they called it the Cole effect, the gradual but undeniable shift in how the Valkyrie Empire viewed humanity. Treaties were signed. Technology was shared. Human colonies flourished under Valkyrie protection, and Valkyrie culture was enriched by human art, music, and philosophy. They also called it the Queen's Joy, the way Seraphael ruled in those decades, with a warmth and wisdom that surpassed even her previous centuries. She wasn't softer exactly. She was fuller, complete in a way she hadn't been before. And when, decades later, age finally claimed me, as it claims all humans, she was there, holding my hand, telling me stories of all the moments we'd shared, promising that she would carry our love into the centuries to come. "I'll find you again," she said, as the light began to fade. "In whatever comes next, I'll find you." I believed her. I still do. The end.